In this video, I'm going to look at this $250 kit that I've put together for making really good espresso at home. And this is obviously completely unheard of. Most people kind of think that you have to spend way more than this to get proper espresso equipment set up. What's amazing about this setup is my wife and I are absolutely completely convinced that this thing makes way better coffee than we get even in coffee shops. And that's just really, really cool. So I hope this video is a bit of a cheat sheet on anyone who wants to get the TLDR on how to enjoy good espresso at home. So the kit I've put together here is a really good starting point and at a way lower price than most of the super expensive setups that seem to dominate the coffee YouTuber scene. The coffee machine I'm looking at here was actually sent to me for free a couple of months ago in exchange for a mention in another video. So this is nothing to do with that, and there are no more obligations I need to fulfill for this. So I'm actually making this video now as if I had bought this thing myself. What's interesting is all the big coffee YouTubers who have actually reviewed this thing all seem to agree that it's actually brilliant as well. So I think anyone who enjoys coffee at some point in their lives kind of goes into this idea of exploring what's involved in getting a really good coffee machine set up at home. And then you end up doing a bit of research and watching James Hoffmann, and then you realize that actually a decent setup here is extremely expensive. You can easily plow thousands of dollars into this equipment. And this is where I found myself a couple of years ago. And as a result of this kind of situation where you get the impression that to do the whole process justice, you've got to spend this minimum amount. Otherwise, you're just kind of wasting your time and your money. I actually parked the idea as a result. So when I was sent this Outin Nano a couple of months ago, I revisited the whole idea, and I was absolutely thrilled to find out just how much was possible without spending a fortune. By getting the right manual grinder and using the Outin Nano instead of a really expensive countertop machine, you can get coffee shop or better quality coffee at home and even anywhere, because this whole system is completely portable. So like everything on this channel, I've gone down a major research rabbit hole trying to get my head around espresso, to understand all of the ins and outs of the process, to make sure I'm making the most out of this and doing everything the right way. And it's really fascinating because it turns out you've got a whole bunch of these parameters that you need to understand in order to get good quality espresso. And when I first started using the Outin machine, I hadn't got my head around this, and it was kind of underwhelming. I was wondering what was going on. So it turns out you've basically got all of these different kinds of parameters that you've got to understand and tune to get the best out of the machine. So the idea with an espresso machine is that you have your ground coffee in a container, and then you force hot water through that, and that extracts your coffee and it comes out the other end. So the way you adjust this extraction time is by tuning the fineness of your coffee grind. And this is obviously related to how much coffee you're actually putting in as well. And then from there, the amount of water you actually put through dictates how much coffee you get out. And this is called the yield, and it's measured by weight instead of volume. So when you hear people talking about espresso, you'll hear them talk about the ratio. And what that means is it's the ratio of coffee grounds to the amount of coffee you get out at the other end. So if you've got a ratio of 1 to 2, it means the weight of your extracted coffee is twice the weight of the original coffee grounds that you put in the basket. And the standard espresso ratio is 1 to 2. So if we use 18 grams of ground coffee, we're expecting a yield of 36 grams. So with that target yield from the ratio that you're working with, you then adjust the fineness of the grind and the tamping pressure to get the extraction time to between 25 and 30 seconds. And you can tune that extraction time to change the characteristics of the coffee you're making. So you kind of think, actually, is this just one of these things that you can make all these adjustments and you're never really going to notice? But actually, this isn't one of those things at all. If you make a small adjustment on your grind size, you can drastically change the overall extraction time very quickly. And a 15-second extraction compared to a 30-second extraction is a disaster. You know, it's really obvious that you really ruined your coffee, which obviously, makes it possible to waste a lot of coffee when you're in this tuning stage. But that's just kind of the way it is. But the reward is so great, it's easily worth it. So it's obviously very apparent that the grind size is a crucial part of this process. So you're going to need a grinder that has this super fine adjustment between the grind sizes. And that's why coffee grinders that are capable of this at espresso fineness, which is very fine, are so expensive. So it's obviously really apparent very quickly that one of the most important parts of this whole process is the grinder. And when people start researching this, they see the prices of these recommended electric coffee grinders because they think they need an electric one for the convenience. And that's where this thing starts to get really expensive. But the reality is you can get manual coffee grinders that still have this incredible control over the fineness, but they're a fraction of the cost. So I went with a KINGrinder K2, and it's really well reviewed on Reddit, and it has everything that you need, the fineness of grind for espresso, but also the fine adjustments between those grind sizes. And this one's actually got a larger burr size, so it grinds really fast. It takes no time at all. I'll time it and put it on screen. And the effort involved is also really minimal. It's a totally different experience to if you've ever used one of those old-fashioned wooden box type grinders or anything like that. So what's interesting is James Hoffman actually reviewed one of these cheaper KINGrinders, and they've of course now all gone out of stock. So you might want to look at some of the other models that have seemed to come up as being very well regarded, and that was the Espresso and the Comandante ones. But they are a good bit more money than the KINGrinder ones. This KINGrinder is really easy to use. It feels nice. There's no real ergonomic issue there at all. It's got a nice round wooden handle, and it just grinds through coffee in no time at all. So the ergonomics are one of these things that people take quite seriously with the grinder, because it is one of these things you are using a lot of the time, using it all the time every day. So you don't want that experience to be unpleasant. And one of the things that comes up a lot when people buy cheaper electric grinders is they use these plastic containers, and they suffer from this static problem. Well, this grinder doesn't have anything like that. It's all metal, and it just doesn't have this static problem. All of the ground coffee just shoots straight out when you empty it, and there's no problem there at all. So we know we need to be able to obviously weigh the amount of beans that we put into our grinder so that we're getting the dose right, and that means coffee scales are the next thing we need to look at. Now, the ones I've got here, they're not super expensive either. You haven't got to spend a fortune on this, but you do need something that has the accuracy, so sort of tenths of a gram accuracy, but also they have this timer mode, because obviously we need to time the extraction time to make sure we're getting that right. So they have this mode where they start a timer as soon as they detect weight, which is obviously very specific to this kind of thing. So that's the reason you end up looking at scales specifically for this purpose. So there's loads of these kinds of scales on the market. I don't think it's super important which ones you go for. As long as they have that accuracy and they have the timer mode, you're going to be okay. One of the main things to look out for is the speed that they update. I think the ones I've got are a little bit on the slow side. You have to just kind of wait a little moment every time you add a bean or two. It doesn't quite update immediately, but they're still pretty fast. The scales I've got here actually also have USB-C charging, which is really good, and the battery lasts forever in between charges. So that's a nice feature to have if you're looking at the different options here too. So the coffee machine we're using is of course the Outin Nano, but I've upgraded it with their Basket Plus attachment, and this just improves this thing so much. I think if you're going to get one, you should definitely get the Basket Plus. It gives you a proper basket that can fit 18-gram dose in for a double shot of espresso, and it just improves the workflow so much. It's so much easier to work with this basket, and it empties out really easily because it's conical. Just a brilliant update there, and obviously allows for that proper double shot dose. So the Outin Nano is a really interesting product. It actually can heat the water as well, so you can just take this anywhere with you, and actually it can make espresso just with pouring cold water into the top of it. It heats it and then pumps it through and gives you espresso. That's really cool and gives it real utility for kind of camping situations as well. The nice thing about the Basket Plus is that it comes with this doser and tamper, and the doser size is actually just wide enough so that when you tip over the grinder, it fits within that completely. So you can just tip it straight in and you don't get any mess. It's really easy to work with, a really pleasant experience. So I think the take home here is that this is a setup that I'm now confident is not in itself going to be the limiting factor in the quality of coffee I can make at home. Things like what beans I use are going to have a far bigger impact on the overall taste of the coffee. And the nice thing about this setup is because it isn't super expensive, it's not like you feel that you need to be buying the most expensive beans to justify it either. I'm quite happy using cheap coffee beans from a supermarket in this, and you get incredible results out of this setup with those beans. In fact, my wife and I both agree this is easily as good as any coffee we get from our local coffee shops too, and that's just awesome to be able to do that at home. If you've enjoyed this video and like me you use coffee to kind of boost your mental state when you're working with computers, you'll enjoy this video where I look at how I use a treadmill desk to both get the best out of working with computers in terms of kind of ergonomics and physical comfort, but also in terms of stimulating that kind of mental productive flow state of mind as a result of walking while working on computers. So I'll see you there.